Have you seen this man? U.S. Marshals and local authorities tell News 3 that 30-year-old Cola Beal is armed and dangerous.
Police in two Hampton Road cities believe he could be behind 3 murders in 5 days.
The string of murders all started when a house near Virginia Wesleyan University went up in flames. It's believed that Beal killed his 31-year-old girlfriend before allegedly setting her house on fire. The very next day, Beal was connected to another murder. A 71-year-old man who neighbors say Beal was close with was found dead from a gunshot. And then the very latest, just this Monday, Norfolk police found a man dead inside of his home on Sewells Point Road.
I came back and set the house on fire. I poured gasoline all over the house. So when I did the dog was getting burnt alive, so I was like, okay, I watched that because that funny.
A man suspected of killing 3 people in Norfolk and Virginia Beach is behind bars.
Beal is not really a stranger to the inside of a jail cell. He has a long criminal history that dates back all the way to 2005. Beal served prison time for armed robbery and sexual assault on a child. And in 2012, Beal pled guilty to several crimes, including conspiracy and 2 separate charges of robbery, including armed robbery and use of a firearm by a felon. Now, Beal served 6 years for those crimes, and he was on supervised probation.
Cola Beal's history is not that unusual when we put it in perspective with the histories of other people with severe psychopathy. In psychopathy, a person's view is primarily that they are unconstrained, that if they want something, nothing should really stand between them and their idea of achieving their goal. They just don't take other people's views into account, really. It's all about them and what they want.
What happened to Xavier?
She's dead, I killed her.
Why'd you kill her, man?
At the end of the day, man, I had a lot of build-up, man. That triggered me, man. She going through depression. The moment keep calling her, talking about me, but it's crazy you don't respect somebody's relationship. And my life already hectic. So now I'm trying to live my life after doing 6 years from robbing and all that I'm wearing a sex charge for some I ain't do. That's enough to make me want to kill a whole bunch of How you like living with some you ain't do?
He's angry right out of the gate, and he's really taking the role of the victim. He's been falsely accused of the sex crime. You know, wouldn't that make you angry? Well, you get a flair for his criminal versatility, his impulsivity, his failure to accept responsibility, kind of blaming his girlfriend's parents, her mother, for having caused him to murder her.
Now I'm gonna get all the guns and now I'm gonna kill everything. Why? Because ain't nobody trying to hear me. But they hear me now when I start killing them. They hear me now. It's crazy.
So the issues between you and your girl, that was more of her family getting involved?
It was good. Her family kept trying to get involved in our relationship, man. But they would never check on her. I don't even come in and check on her. She laid in there dead. You wanna figure out what's going on? You texting me. I the one who killed her because you didn't give a about her. If you did, if you would have checked on your loved one, her body was laying there, y'all ain't see it till I let that on fire.
He sort of distanced himself from his own responsibility. He's just figured out how to deal with that by just sort of like admitting it and then just sweeping it to the side. And there's certainly grandiose things about Mr. Beale, but this one is definitely a twisted one. Like the idea that he's the better person because he actually cared about her in some fashion, but then her family didn't because it took him setting her on fire to get their attention. His resorting to violence and the direction of that violence is kind of everybody else's fault.
Who set the fire to the car?
I did all that by myself, bro. I could have did more, but I was just like, I'm just gonna keep moving. I'm just gonna enjoy my last days. You know what I mean? I was like, man. I was mad. I was real mad.
According to Beale, he hasn't been heard much of his life. And so the fire is symbolic of Beale's life, in some ways going up in flames, and he acknowledges that, life is over. It's also, I think, a manifestation of his desire to be on the front stage in the most grandiose display of crime and violence. Not only am I going to kill people, but I'm also going to set a fire so everybody can see what's happening. This is the perfect opportunity for him to, be heard.
Where was she shot at?
I shot everybody in the head.
What was the deal with the tape on her and the gag?
I didn't rape her. I just tied her up. I was gonna let her go. I just wanted to shut the up. But she was already in this mode. I was like, look, man, I ain't trying to hear it, man. Put the gun to her head. I told her, I said, look, man, I'm gonna show you something. So I pulled the dog in the room. I poured chlorine all over that. I poured bleach all over that. I took the lighter out and tried to set it on fire. She hops off the bed. And this is what she tells me. He has nothing to do with this. Take me, let him live.
Who was having the dog?
Yeah. She said, take me, take my life instead. Let the dog live. He had nothing to do with this. I said, word? I told you I would let you go and live your life. And I was just gonna be on the run. So at this point, she not listening. She like, no. I'm like, shut the up. Yeah, so you don't make no scene. Cause I was gonna leave her just like that, but not do nothing to her and let her get out.
It's still all about him. He's astonished that she would say, oh, take me, save the dog. And his whole point is, she's not even listening to him. It's not about the dog, it's not about her. He doesn't want to hear anything that she has to say. Putting the tape over her mouth really quickly, he says, oh, no, I didn't rape her. But I think he was tired of hearing what she had to say. So she was making too much noise. And I think that lack of understanding is because he does not experience empathy like normal people do.
What did you do with Prince?
I didn't do nothing with Prince. Prince stayed alive until I came back and set the house on fire.
So you just in the crate?
Yeah. I actually stood there, so I poured gasoline all over the house. And when I tried to light it, the flames burst, they came up. They came up in front of my face, and I turned around, I seen the dog. The dog was getting burnt alive, so I was like, okay. I watched that because that was funny.
There's just absolutely no regard for a living entity, whether it's humans or animals. When you look at Beale's behavior, there really is an element of sadism to them, not only in the way he interacts and describes the way that he murdered his girlfriend and the conversation they had leading up to her death, and then also to hurt a completely innocent, vulnerable animal is sadistic.
I was gonna let her live, but when you tell me leave the dog and take you, you don't really give a about us nowhere. You ain't give a about your life nowhere. So she made it seem, so that's what I brought her in.
When was Clifton shot? I know you did care about him. I did know that.
Yeah, I did.
I know growing up he treated you really good. I can't say what happened, like you said, when he was when you got out.
Like every time I would ask him for a little bit of help, he'd tell me he ain't got it, and I know you got it. I know you lying to me. So you keep telling me you lying, and I'm gonna take it off. So when I finally got in, you know what I mean? When I finally got in there with my cousin, I popped his ass. We ain't do it Thursday. Me and my cousin went in there.
You got down
Yeah.
What happened to Clifton?
Me and my cousin went in there, and I made sure, as soon as I walk in there, he laid down on the couch. So as soon as he see him come behind me, he like, whoa, what the boom, I shot him in the head. And I ain't give This is what happens when somebody getting tired. He don't care what die.
Moving on to the father figure, Clifton Baxter, there's no longitudinal connection of any kind of relationship. That regard is absent. That building of a connection, you know, the things that enable most of us to build a relationship, those traits are missing in psychopaths. Their relationships are transactional. What can they do for me now? And that's where he focuses his explanation. Hey, in the recent time, whenever I asked for money, not only did Clifton Baxter not give it to me, he lied about it. You know, so it's like a double affront. This person is a liar who, you know, disrespects me and won't give me what I want. So I shot him.
I know you're angry. I mean, that's clear, but do you have any sort of remorse or anything looking back?
Remorse? Like what? I don't feel nothing no more. I've been stopped feeling. I probably gonna kill some more people because that's how mad I am behind all this. Like, I got judged on that trying to live a regular life. No, like man.
I think his theme is, I should never have been accused of a sex offense. They should have cleared me. I think he feels that this has ruined his life, and now he's going to make us all pay for it. I think he's being genuine about the idea of no remorse.
My dad had killed her too. I just caught more bodies than him. I just tried not to let that side come out, but all the that was going on there, it just popped out. I had enough. Like, I just had enough. Tried to be better than him. Failed at that. He got more bodies than him.
There probably was some inherent propensity towards violence. He was surrounded by violence. When Cola Beale was a child, his father, Cola Beale III, actually tried to murder his mother. She survived, but now his father is in jail for having murdered his stepmother. He's identifying as a killer as well by saying, oh, my father is a killer too. And then he talks about having a higher body count than his father. We know that with psychopathy, some of the research has shown there is a genetic component to it. Not that that's the only reason that somebody may have psychopathic traits, but given his father's history, it does make me wonder about what might be underlying from a biological perspective. So the whole nature and nurture, both of those factors seem to play a role for Beale.
So that brings me into your cousin, which is McLean. His last name's McLean. Now, he went with you on that Wednesday.
Yeah.
So then what happened between you and your cousin?
I didn't want to do it, but I did it because he's snapping on everybody that's around us. My life gone. You talking stuff and like yelling. So I tell you to calm down because I already killed 2 people. I'm already seeing red. he started making a scene, I told him to calm down. And he tried to put his hands on it. I got fed up with him because he kept talking like you not about this, you not gonna do nothing. Like, bro, I just killed 2 people. You don't think I'm ready to shoot again? So I went right in the kitchen and shot him right in the head. He didn't drop, he just kept moving in circles. Then I shot him in the back to make sure he hit the ground.
Do you feel any remorse for killing 3?
I don't feel no remorse about none of this at all. When you snap, you don't think about remorse. That's not something that comes to your mind when you're snapping.
Obviously, the police were looking for you. So were you planning on running away or looking for more people?
I was definitely looking for more people. But I was choosing my people wisely. I wasn't choosing just regular people.
These are examples of an individual who doesn't have that human connection that the average person does. And he doesn't seem to feel guilty at all. In fact, isn't even sure what he should feel guilty about. You know, her family interfered. Mr. Baxter didn't give him money when he needed. You know, his cousin was talking back and wouldn't stop. He really has this very shallow affect, and that he doesn't seem emotionally impacted at all. For all 3 of Beal's victims, he has made a personal connection and justification for why he should murder them. They all deserved it for one reason or another.
Cola, a lot of people in your position would say, I didn't do this, and plead not guilty.
As a man, I will take up for my wrongdoings. I snapped on my cousin for a simple reason. I snapped on my dad for a reason. And I snapped on my girlfriend for a different reason. None of this had nothing to do with what they liked and what they were dealing with.
Did you harm anybody else in the process that no one has found out about yet?
No, but I was getting ready to pop back out in the daylight, and I definitely was about to do something. If they hadn't picked me up, last night, I definitely would have got out and let out some more steam, because at the end of the day, nobody hears you when you talking regular. You gotta do something like this. I done lived my life. I was gonna do it differently, but it went out.
County Sheriff's Office. Yes, I'd like to report my dad and my daughter missing. They sent me a text saying they were going to Georgia, and they ain't there. All their clothes are missing, pillows, camping equipment. I don't even know if they really left Florida. I talked to my dad about maybe seeing if he could take over and watch her for me, because she doesn't want to. She has oppositional defiancy. The 23rd was last day that we heard from them. Okay, so you need to see the officer. They're saying they have to make contact with you. Thank you. Bye.
When the police arrive, Cheyenne Jessie's not crying, she doesn't sound worried. Her daughter is a 6-year-old who has medical needs, has behavioral problems, appointments with doctors, and it seems really unusual that a mother would wait a week to call 911. This is a context in which I think the police should be thinking, this woman knows a great deal more than she's letting on.
How's Meredith and Shane's relationship as, mother-daughter? How was she as a kid?
She could really be hell on wheels sometimes. She had her good days where she was a perfect angel, and then she sometimes just like flipping a switch. She could be completely miserable. We took her to Peace River and everything. They got her diagnosed with obsessive defiancy, bipolar, and ADHD.
Did that ever put a strain on yours and Shane's relationship?
Yeah. And
How bad, if you don't mind me asking?
At one point, I told her if we don't get some kind of help for the kid, I ain't gonna be able to put up with it.
We would expect a loving mother to say, okay, well then you must leave because my first obligation is to my child. But instead, Jessie sees her daughter as an object that gets in her way. She doesn't find any use in her. She's blocking her from what she wants.
How's her and Mark?
Everybody has their little disagreements. They had their share. He's yelled at her to get her to understand something. He had to do that. Because if you yell at Cheyenne, she shuts down somewhat. She doesn't really want to talk.
As we learn more about Jessie, we find out that she has a complicated relationship with her father. There's confrontation, there's anger, irritability, according to her boyfriend. This complicates the features for someone with psychopathy because since they don't regulate emotions like a healthy person does, it makes them more frustrated when they can't just get what they want. So they tend to become quite impatient and short with people. They ask for something, and when they don't get it, they get angry and they react.
While Meredith has been gone, have you attempted to call
Mark? I attempted to call him. I texted him, and he sent me the text messages that he ain't coming back and go ahead and get rid of all this stuff. I'm taking Meredith up to her grandmother's in Georgia. So when she got home, I let her read the text message.
What did she do or how did she act?
She broke down. She crying. I said, well, the best thing to do right now is see if we can get in touch with you.
Okay, so the morning after you get these text messages, you and her go to Mark's house?
Yeah.
When you were over there, did you smell anything?
Yeah, a real horrible smell. Then she pulled a coon out from underneath the house and threw it out into the woods. She said she found dead rats in the house. But she also asked me something funny at Walmart.
What's that?
How long does it take maggots to decay a body? And she asked me if I thought one of those big 55-gallon tubs would hold the body.
I think Jessie thought that she had control over Cody. I think she thought that she could, use her feminine ways and victim mentality, and in turn, she was buying his loyalty, but that's not what happened. He comes out and tells police everything. One of the traits of psychopathy is trying to control other people and control the story that's being told about you to others. And the way she did that, or attempted to do that with Cody, sort of backfired.
Is there anything else you want to tell us? Jump clean about something else? This is right now, bro, at the time.
I had nothing to do with that.
But I'm gonna start from the beginning. Came here freely, you wanted to help?
I wanted to help my daughter be found.
So did you talk to him again? Did you try to call him? Did you ever talk to him on Sunday?
No.
Okay, did you talk to him on Monday?
No, I didn't try myself. I drove by there and they weren't home.
And when you went in the front door, was there anything out of place or anything?
It just stunk in there. It just smelled like dead rats or dead something. Well, I did find some rats and stuff, and I threw them away. I searched the house. There was nothing in there. I found a coon underneath the house. I took it out and threw it.
What do you think happened to your dad and your daughter?
His girlfriend texted me and said that he rented a car Monday. I'm afraid of, maybe he didn't leave Florida and he went over to Biggie's house and she did something. That's what I'm feeling. I think she might have hurt them or something, or maybe she has them in her house.
I know you have a very tough life, okay? Having to deal with your daughter and those situations. And do you love your daughter?
I love her with all my heart.
All right. But I know you're having a tough time with that, and it's affecting your relationship because you said that Even with your daughter not there, it's made it better for you and Cody to work on your problems.
So we can handle her.
There's an idea in the concept of psychopathy that we talk about, which is called shallow affect, which refers to the idea that people don't have a wide range of emotions. We just get this monotonous kind of tone describing things, but putting out some ideas that in and of themselves are actually quite distressing. Maybe she's been hurt by girlfriend Vicky, right? She's trying out different narratives about what might have happened that will help shift the blame from her. I think that's a manipulative strategy that to keep the police guessing, keep the police busy, but not paying attention to her.
I'm telling you right now, I just need you to be honest with me. I don't think you found a dead Rick. Okay? I really don't think that. There's blood at the house. And you know the blood's there. You knew the blood was there when you were at the house. You knew before the police got there.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Where are they?
I don't know. All I know is that when I take my medicine, I pass out, and I don't remember what happened during the time that I'm...
You passed out. I don't believe that. Okay? This little show is not working.
Not a show.
You're not crying. There's not one tear. Your daughter, she doesn't have a medication, and not one tear is falling from her face. So don't try to make them come out now. Like,
I am crying. I just can't. I'm dehydrated.
I'm dehydrated. That's biologically ridiculous, right? This is someone who doesn't respond well when things get overwhelming, who does not like to be challenged, who does not like when things get rough, when things don't happen the way she just wants them to happen, and will respond negatively, will respond in a way in which other people were not anticipating. She's definitely saying the first thing that comes to mind to try to make it more reasonable, but the problem is that her reasonableness is so ridiculous that it's unbelievable.
Let me ask you a question. Why did you ask Cody at Walmart if he thinks the body would fit in a 55-gallon drum? Why did you ask him? Did Cody give you an ultimatum? Did he say you need to tighten up with your daughter or else? Did he tell you that?
Yeah.
I know it's hard. I know it's going to be real tough to tell the truth. I know you want to. I think you're a bad person.
I always had to defend myself from my daddy, so I told him, take care of my daughter because I can't take care of her no more.
You had to defend yourself from your dad?
My dad's always gotten angry at me and yelled and like gets in my face and punches the wall and stuff. And I've always had the coward in the corner.
So was he abusive when you dropped Meredith off? Or just verbal?
Yeah, he verbally looked at me and said that you're a horrible mom for just dropping your kid off and leaving. Like your mother, you're just like your mother. You drop your kid off and you leave her. And I'm like, now I ask you to take her for me. It feels so worthless with my dad around.
And now she's a victim, someone who's afraid of Mark Weekly and terrified and vulnerable. So this is setting the stage for a new narrative. If there's a physical threat, we generally accept the idea that a person has the right to physically defend themselves. So she's planting the seeds that it wasn't just verbal, it was physical. Harm is being done to her by this aggressive, violent man, her father.
What happened?
Oh, I don't remember. Like, it's like they became a different person, like I blacked out.
And what happened when you blacked out? You eventually woke up because you cleaned up. So what happened? And it may have been because you're mad, your dad came at you and stuff went wrong.
When someone says they black out, especially in a criminal case, it's usually a convenient excuse to discard any sort of responsibility. Jesse's placing blame on her medication and why she takes medication. She's not just controlling the situation of how police are seeing her, but she's displacing blame, which is a key psychopathic trait. They don't take any responsibility for what they've done. Taking responsibility is not in their mentality whatsoever.
Hey, so what happened when you got there? Did he come at you with a knife?
He came at me like this.
With a knife?
This way, and then my daughter was coming this way, and that's all I remember is her, you pushing her away.
And then what did you do?
I kicked him in his balls, and then he kept talking more, and I wanted up on the floor. And then knife and I stabbed him in the chest.
At what room did this happen at? You grabbed your gun?
Yeah.
After you stabbed him?
Yeah, because he was still alive. He said, I'm going to kill you too. I pushed it down and fired it on his neck.
You shot his neck?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, did you see blood on your daughter?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that at all. All I remember is that she had blood on me. And I was scared.
Did you stab your daughter?
No.
Who stabbed your daughter?
This is where you see the remarkable ability to invent a story very quickly. The minute he says, did he come at you with a knife? She's like, yes. She's already playing the acting. She's making it up as she goes. It is a remarkable example of how rapidly a psychopath can generate what might be a compelling narrative to someone who's like falls for the tears and then the apparent detail in what she's saying. This is the new scenario. This is the new reality she wants to create.
At what point did you give first aid to your daughter?
I went over there, and then when I grabbed her neck popped backwards. It was horrifying. There was blood coming out of everywhere.
Well, where was the injury at? Can you point out my neck?
It was straight through all the way back through a drug dealer. I kind of covered it, and I'm like, Meredith, and I felt the knife go out of her, and I'm like, no, Meredith, please.
One question I have is, there's in the couch and bus seat, there's like slash marks there and puncture holes. How'd that happen?
I just had it make it look like dog was on there. I don't know. I didn't want to look at the couch anymore. So after they were gone at the house, I started stabbing the couches because I was pissed off.
I would have anticipated her to be crying, and it isn't. It's not the time that she's crying. It's cold. It's meant for other people to see her as a grieving mother, but she's not a grieving mother. She didn't care that her daughter died. Then later she says, I was angry. She was just so angry. She had been angry. She had been angry at Monroe for threatening to leave. She had been angry at her father for the abuses that she thought that she suffered from before. And she was most angry at her daughter because the daughter put her in a position to have to make a choice. And the psychopath doesn't like to be forced choice.
Well, what's up with the shovel that you took out of the bathtub?
I was trying to clean up the blood. To shovel up the crap that they left there.
What crap?
When the body dies, it releases the feces and rigor mortis and stuff. I think that I didn't know what to do. And it's just something I seen on Criminal Minds.
So he attacked you with a knife, but he never cut you? I don't see any cuts. So if this was all done out of self-defense, why didn't you tell anybody? Why didn't you call the sheriff's office and let us know what happened?
You sure? I don't believe that story. I think you stabbed your daughter because you wanted to get rid of her to save your relationship.
No, I didn't.
And you also killed your dad on purpose. There was no self-defense there. Well, they were scared, but we need to find them. Are they in the house?
No, they were in the shed cleaning because I didn't know what to do.
Are they in totes or what?
I just don't want to tell.
What stands out here is that Jessie has no remorse, no shame, no feelings whatsoever that her daughter is dead, her dad is dead, and that she did this. And that's pretty consistent with a psychopath. So if she is crying or pretending to cry, I think it has more to do with her going to jail and being punished and losing the one thing that probably mattered the most to her, which was the affection and attention of Matthew Cody Monroe.
According to reports, Cheyenne Jessie killed her father and daughter inside her father's home. She returned days later and put their bodies in plastic totes, then hid them in a neighbor's shed.
Cheyenne Jessie, I think, is a product of a lot of different things. Her own psychopathy was probably a development of a deprived childhood. I think she ran up against a society in which she thought that the only thing that she had was her being a woman, and her being a woman meant that she needed to have a man. And the challenge that she received by having a 6-year-old who was acting like a 6-year-old, I think all of that was too overwhelming for her. And in her psychopathy, she was willing to completely detach from the relationships that she should have leaned on for support. I also think that those relationships, whether it was her father or whether it was her boyfriend or whether it was her daughter.
It started with a phone that would not stop ringing. 3:17 a.m. A narrow apartment in Queens. A mother jolted awake by the sharp, metallic cry of a landline slicing through the dark. On the other end, nothing but air. Breathing. Slow. Measured. Then a click. Silence. By sunrise, her daughter was gone. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No neighbors who heard a scream. Just a half-open bedroom window and a bed that looked as if someone had risen in the middle of a dream and never returned. 19-year-old Elena Vargas, college freshman, part-time waitress, no enemies anyone could name, vanished into the humid July night of 1992. By noon, the words were already spreading: missing girl, suspicious circumstances, possible abduction. By evening, the tabloids had a new phrase burning across their covers: cold case in the making. The city was restless that summer. Crime headlines stacked high, sirens constant. But this one felt different. Maybe it was the phone call. Maybe it was the window. Maybe it was the way her mother swore she heard footsteps on the fire escape just minutes before the ringing began. Police canvassed the block. Doors knocked. Questions fired. Did you see anything? Hear anything? A man lingering? A car idling too long? No one did. Or no one admitted they did. Elena's room became a shrine overnight. Posters still on the walls. Textbooks open on a desk. A half-written note to a friend about a concert she planned to attend in Manhattan that weekend. Investigators bagged everything. Fingerprints. Fibers. The bedsheets. The phone itself. They found partial prints on the window frame, smudged, incomplete. Not enough to run through the limited databases of the early 90s. Not enough to name a suspect, but enough to whisper one chilling word: intrusion. Within 48 hours, rumors multiplied. A stalker from the diner where she worked. A jealous classmate. A random predator climbing fire escapes in the dead of night. Detectives chased each lead with the urgency of a city on edge. Interviews ran late into the night. Elena's coworkers described a quiet young woman who kept mostly to herself. One mentioned a man who came in every Thursday, sat alone, watched her longer than comfort allowed. No name. Paid cash. Left no trace. Then came the discovery that changed everything and solved nothing. 3 miles away, in an abandoned lot behind a shuttered warehouse, a maintenance worker found Elena's purse. Wallet intact. Cash untouched. IDs still inside. No signs of struggle in the dirt. No blood. Just the purse placed carefully beside a rusted chain-link fence, as if set down deliberately. A message? A taunt? Or a calculated move to mislead? The press descended. Cameras flashed. The phrase "mysterious disappearance" echoed across evening broadcasts. Detectives widened the search radius. Dogs combed nearby industrial buildings. Divers checked murky canals. Nothing. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The case cooled under the weight of newer crimes. Louder headlines. Bloodier scenes. But in the Vargas apartment, time refused to move. Birthdays passed. Holidays dimmed. Her mother kept the porch light on every night for 12 years. Detectives rotated in and out of the file. Leads dried up. Witness memories blurred. The partial fingerprints remained in a manila envelope, labeled, filed, nearly forgotten. Technology was evolving, but not fast enough. Not yet. In 1998, an anonymous letter arrived at the precinct. 3 sentences, typed, "No return address. You missed the obvious. Look closer to home." She trusted him. No signature. No explanation. Handwriting analysis revealed nothing useful. The paper was generic. The postmark smeared. Detectives revisited friends, neighbors, coworkers. They scrutinized family members with painful precision. Nothing stuck. The letter joined the file, another fragment in a puzzle with no picture. Years bled into decades. The city transformed. Payphones vanished. Surveillance cameras multiplied. DNA databases expanded beyond what any 1992 detective could have imagined. And in 2019, a newly formed cold case unit reopened Elena's file as part of a backlog initiative. Boxes pulled from storage. Evidence recatalogued. Old photographs scanned into digital clarity. A new pair of eyes studied the partial prints from the window frame. This time, they didn't look insignificant. Advanced enhancement software extracted more detail from the smudged ridges than ever before. What had once been a blur now suggested structure. Patterns. Enough points of comparison to run through national systems that did not exist when Elena disappeared. The print went live in the database late on a Tuesday afternoon. The hit came back in under an hour. A name surfaced. Not a career criminal. Not a known predator. A municipal employee with a clean record, hired in 1991 as a maintenance technician for city housing complexes. Assigned to multiple buildings across Queens, including Elena's block, during the summer she vanished. He had access to master keys, knowledge of fire escapes, familiarity that bred invisibility. His name had never appeared in the original file. Investigators dug deeper. Employment logs confirmed he performed routine repairs in Elena's building 2 weeks before her disappearance. A clogged sink in apartment 3B. A faulty hallway light. Residents remembered him vaguely. Quiet. Polite. Unremarkable. The kind of man you hold a door for and forget seconds later. But the database hit was only partial, strong enough to raise alarms, not strong enough to arrest. Detectives needed more. They needed DNA. And then they found the second forgotten detail. In 1992, technicians had collected skin cells from beneath Elena's fingernails during the initial missing persons report, standard procedure in suspected abductions. At the time, testing capabilities were limited. The sample was logged, stored, untouched for decades. Now, with modern forensic science, it became the key. The sample was degraded but viable. A lab worked for weeks, coaxing fragments into a usable profile. When the results returned, the room fell silent. The DNA matched the municipal employee with statistical certainty. 1 in several trillion odds of coincidence. The quiet man with the master keys. But there was a problem. A devastating one. He had died in 2008. A heart attack at age 56. Cremated. No confession. No prior arrests. No known connection to Elena beyond routine maintenance. His family described him as gentle, devoted, incapable of violence. Neighbors called him reserved but kind. No one had ever suspected him of anything darker than a parking dispute. Detectives reconstructed timelines. Phone records from 1992 were sparse, but they found something chilling in archived utility logs. A service request placed from Elena's apartment 2 days before she vanished. The caller reported a loose window latch. The assigned technician, the same man. He had been inside her room. The theory formed slowly, painfully. He fixes the latch, notices the young woman, learns her schedule, returns under cover of night, uses knowledge of the building to climb unseen. The phone call at 3:17 a.m. a test. To see who answers. To ensure the mother is asleep. Then entry through the window he once examined. Swift, silent, controlled. But theories are not verdicts. Without a body, prosecutors hesitated. Without a confession, the story remained circumstantial, stitched together by science and inference. The district attorney held a press conference anyway. Cameras rolled. The headline exploded across screens. 1992 cold case closed. Forgotten evidence reveals unexpected suspect. Closed. For the department, it was a victory decades overdue. For the Vargas family, it was something far more complicated. Relief tangled with rage. Answers that arrived too late. A name to blame, but no trial to watch. No sentence to hear. No chance to ask why. And still, one question refused to die. Where is Elena? Search teams revisited properties once serviced by the suspect. Storage units. Old work sites. Landfills long sealed. Nothing surfaced. Not a bone. Not a scrap of fabric. The man took his secret to the grave, leaving behind only DNA and doubt. In Queens, neighbors who once waved at him now revisit memories with horror. Did he watch from windows? Did he linger too long in hallways? Was there another victim no one connected? The cold case may be labeled closed, but the silence around that July night remains deafening. Because somewhere between the ringing phone and the half-open window, between the careful placement of a purse and the smudged fingerprint on painted wood, a young woman stepped into darkness. And decades later, even with science illuminating the edges, the center of that darkness is still untouched. The porch light in the Vargas apartment no longer burns every night. Time has moved, whether the family wanted it to or not. But in the early hours, when a phone rings unexpectedly and the air feels too still, some neighbors swear they remember 3:17 a.m. They remember the breathing on the line. They remember the summer the city held its breath. And they wonder what other names are waiting inside forgotten envelopes, sealed in dusty boxes, patient as ghosts. The announcement hit the city like a delayed thunderclap. 27 years after a 19-year-old vanished into a humid Queens night, officials stood beneath harsh fluorescent lights and declared the unthinkable. The 1992 cold case was closed. Cameras flashed. Microphones crowded forward. The words sounded definitive, almost triumphant. DNA match. Municipal employee. Deceased suspect. Case resolved. But closure is a fragile word. Behind the headlines, detectives reopened the past with surgical precision. They retraced the suspect's steps, rebuilding a life that had once seemed painfully ordinary. Employment records. Shift assignments. Maintenance logs. He had keys, dozens of them, granting him quiet access to buildings where families slept with doors unlocked in summer heat. He moved through hallways without raising suspicion, a toolbox in hand, a uniform that acted like camouflage. Neighbors began remembering things they once dismissed. A man lingering by the stairwell longer than necessary. A glance held a second too long. The way he always seemed to know who lived where. Memory is unreliable. Detectives knew that, especially when filtered through shock. But patterns began to form. The fire escape outside Elena's window had been recently inspected by city maintenance in June of 1992. The report bore his signature. He had climbed that metal ladder weeks before the disappearance. He knew which windows stuck, which locks were loose, which tenants lived alone. Investigators dug into his personal history. No violent record. No restraining orders. No prior accusations. He had been married once, divorced quietly in the late 80s. No children. Coworkers described him as introverted. Efficient. The kind of man who ate lunch alone in the break room. He clocked in on time. Left on time. No disciplinary issues. Yet when forensic teams re-examined archived evidence from his old apartment, items preserved from an unrelated insurance claim, they found something unsettling. A faded city map of Queens with small red pen marks clustered in one neighborhood. Elena's block sat at the center. The marks meant nothing legally. They could have indicated repair routes, assigned zones. But combined with the DNA beneath Elena's fingernails, they felt heavier. Detectives requested permission to exhume any remaining biological material. There was none. Cremation had erased that possibility. So they turned to familial DNA, collecting voluntary samples from distant relatives to strengthen the match and eliminate any statistical doubt. The results tightened the net. The probability narrowed to near impossibility. The DNA belonged to him. But science answers only one question. Who? It does not answer how long he stood in the dark outside her window. It does not explain whether he whispered before he struck. It does not reveal whether she fought hard enough to draw blood beneath her nails, or if that DNA came from an earlier contact, perhaps during the window repair, when skin brushed skin in passing. That uncertainty became the defense he would never need. The district attorney's office assembled a hypothetical prosecution. They mapped out the narrative they would have presented to a jury: access to the building, recent contact, suspicious mapping, DNA under the victim's fingernails, the anonymous letter urging police to look closer to home. They even revisited the 3:17 a.m. phone call. Phone company archives, though incomplete, revealed that the call originated from a public payphone 3 blocks from the suspect's residence. A coincidence? Or a rehearsal? The payphone no longer existed. Torn out years earlier. Surveillance footage from 1992 was non-existent. Witnesses who once lived nearby had moved, aged, forgotten. The past resisted clarity. Elena's mother attended the press conference, but said nothing. Cameras caught her expression, something between vindication and devastation. For decades, she had insisted her daughter did not run away, did not leave willingly. She had pointed to the purse, untouched cash, the window latch. Now, science had given her a name. Yet the name could not stand in court. It could not answer her simplest question: where's my child? Search warrants followed, even though the suspect was long dead. Investigators combed through properties he once rented, storage lockers he once used, and a patch of wooded land his family owned upstate in the early 90s. Ground-penetrating radar scanned soil that had not been disturbed in decades. Cadaver dogs alerted twice. Both times, the excavation revealed animal remains. Each false lead reopened wounds. Community reaction fractured. Some hailed the closure as overdue justice, proof that cold cases never truly die. Others questioned whether authorities were too eager to declare victory against a man who could no longer defend himself. Talk radio buzzed with skepticism. Could the DNA have been transferred innocently? Could it have been contamination from the 1992 investigation, when evidence handling protocols were less stringent? The lab director addressed those concerns directly. Chain of custody logs were intact. The nail scrapings had been sealed and stored properly. Modern testing minimized contamination risk. The match was solid. Still, doubt lingered in corners. A retired detective who worked the original case spoke anonymously to a local reporter. He admitted they had interviewed the municipal employee in 1992, but only briefly. Routine questioning. The man had been calm, cooperative, forgettable. He didn't trip any alarms, the detective said. If we'd had today's DNA back then, maybe things would have been different. Maybe. That word haunted everyone involved. Investigators re-examined the anonymous 1998 letter. Linguistic experts analyzed syntax and tone. They theorized it may have been written by someone familiar with police procedures, someone who knew the case was stagnating. Could it have been the suspect himself, taunting authorities years later? Or a coworker who sent something off but lacked proof? No fingerprints on the letter. No DNA. Just ink and accusation. Meanwhile, a deeper question emerged. Was Elena the only one? Cold case units cross-referenced missing persons reports from the early 90s within a 20-mile radius of the suspect's work assignments. 2 additional disappearances surfaced. Both young women, both vanished from apartment buildings serviced by city maintenance crews. No bodies. No suspects. No forensic evidence preserved with the same care as Elena's case. Detectives felt the ground shift beneath them. They could not tie those cases directly to him. No DNA, no physical link, but the proximity chilled them. A pattern without proof. A possibility without confirmation. Families of those women demanded answers. Reporters revived their names. The narrative expanded from a single tragedy to a potential series. But speculation is not evidence. Officially, only one case bore his genetic signature. Only one file could be stamped closed. Yet closure felt like a door left slightly ajar, letting in drafts of uncertainty. Elena's apartment building still stands. The fire escape remains bolted to brick, repainted, reinforced. New tenants live in her old room. They know the address carries history. Some say they feel it at night. A heaviness in the air, an echo of something unresolved. Urban myth grows where facts end. Forensic psychologists weighed in, constructing profiles based on the evidence. A man with access and invisibility. Organized. Patient. Likely comfortable in silence. Possibly harboring resentment masked by routine. The 3:17 a.m. call suggested control, a need to orchestrate fear before action. The careful placement of the purse hinted at staging, either to mislead or to prolong uncertainty. Yet without a confession, motive remains speculation. As weeks passed after the announcement, the frenzy faded. Another headline replaced it. Another crime commanded attention. But in quieter rooms, within the cold case unit, within the Vargas household, the story continued to pulse. Detectives compiled a comprehensive report, hundreds of pages long, detailing every step from 1992 to the DNA breakthrough. They archived it carefully, aware that future technology might reopen even this closure. Science evolves. So does doubt. And in the stillness of early morning, when the city hum lowers to a whisper, one detail refuses to settle: the phone call. Why call at all? Why risk noise in a plan that required silence? Some investigators believe it was reconnaissance, to confirm Elena answered, to gauge the household's awareness. Others think it was something darker, a ritual, a thrill, the sound of fear through a receiver. The phone company record proved the call existed. But it could not capture the breathing her mother swore she heard. That breath lingers in memory more vividly than any lab result. The case file may read closed, but its edges remain frayed. A name fills the suspect line. DNA fills the evidentiary gap. Yet the absence of a body leaves a void no paperwork can seal. In Queens, life moves forward. Subway trains roar past. Street vendors shout. Children play beneath the same fire escapes. But somewhere between past and present, between scientific certainty and emotional unrest, the summer of 1992 still hangs suspended. A cold case solved. A suspect identified. A secret buried with him. And a city left to live with answers that feel incomplete, as if the final piece of the puzzle was deliberately removed before anyone realized how much it mattered. Long before the DNA match, before the press conference lights and the word closed stamped across the file, there was only heat. July 1992 baked Queens in thick, unmoving air. Windows stayed open. Curtains lifted with every faint breeze. Fire escapes became ladders of opportunity, iron veins running up brick walls. In that kind of heat, people trusted the night too easily. Elena Vargas had routines. That was the first thing detectives documented. Tuesday and Thursday shifts at the diner on Northern Boulevard. Classes in Manhattan 3 days a week. A habit of calling her mother if she would be home after 10. She rarely broke pattern. Predictable. Structured. Safe. Until she wasn't. On the evening before she vanished, nothing appeared unusual. She returned from work around 11:20 p.m. A neighbor later recalled hearing her laugh softly in the hallway while fumbling with keys. She microwaved leftovers. The kitchen clock still blinked 12:03 a.m. when officers entered the apartment hours later. Her mother went to bed shortly after midnight. Elena lingered in her room. A desk lamp glowed beneath the door. At 3:17 a.m., the phone rang. Her mother answered. No voice, just breathing. Slow, steady. A pause that stretched long enough to become intentional. Then the click. Police traced the call as far as early 90s technology allowed. It bounced through a local exchange. Origin unclear. Filed as suspicious, but inconclusive. In a city of millions, one silent call dissolved into statistical noise. What they did not know then was how carefully someone had studied that apartment. Building schematics later revealed a blind spot in the hallway camera system installed years after the disappearance. In 1992, there were no cameras, no digital footprints. The only witness was the building itself, brick, iron, wood. The fire escape outside Elena's window had a slight bend in the railing, enough to create a foothold invisible from street level. Detectives noticed it only decades later when re-examining photos. A maintenance technician would have seen it instantly, understood its advantage, known exactly where to step to avoid noise. Inside Elena's room, there were no signs of chaos. Her bedspread lay partially folded back, as if she had risen voluntarily. No overturned furniture, no shattered glass. The window showed no force damage. The latch had been repaired 2 days prior, tightened, adjusted, officially secured, which meant whoever entered knew precisely how to manipulate it. Investigators reconstructed possibilities. A soft tap on the glass, a whisper of her name, a familiar face in the shadows. Or perhaps the intruder moved quickly, decisively, eliminating any chance to scream. The DNA under her fingernails suggested contact, maybe struggle, but not prolonged violence. No blood was found in the room. No drag marks. It felt controlled. In 1992, the case escalated fast. Detectives canvassed every resident. They knocked on doors until knuckles bruised. Apartment 3B remembered hearing metal clink outside around 2:45 a.m. Apartment 2A claimed a car engine idled briefly near the curb. Descriptions were vague. A dark sedan. Maybe blue. Maybe gray. Memory warped by fear. Elena's diner co-workers became central to the narrative. One waitress described a middle-aged man who stared too long, who asked Elena personal questions she brushed off with polite deflection. He said he worked for the city, the waitress recalled years later. Always mentioned how he fixed things, how he knew the neighborhood better than anyone. But in the early investigation, that detail drowned in a flood of other tips. Psychics called the hotline. Anonymous voices offered theories. A man from Brooklyn falsely confessed, seeking attention. Detectives chased each lead, exhausted resources, circled back. Weeks slipped by. Then the purse surfaced behind the warehouse. Placed upright. Zipper closed. No robbery motive. That fact alone shifted the case from random crime to something intimate. Personal. Intentional. Detectives speculated the purse was dropped days after the abduction, not immediately. A delayed signal to reignite attention, to manipulate narrative. The warehouse lot was a wasteland of gravel and weeds, surrounded by chain-link fencing. Trucks passed during the day. At night, it was silent. No witnesses stepped forward. No cameras captured the act. Whoever left the purse understood timing. Back in the Vargas apartment, grief turned to vigilance. Her mother replayed every interaction, every repair, every stranger's glance. She remembered the maintenance visit 2 days before the disappearance, the window latch complaint. Elena had mentioned the technician seemed oddly curious, asking about her class schedule. At the time, it felt harmless. In hindsight, it felt predatory. Police had interviewed him briefly. Routine. Standard procedure. He explained the repair. Produced paperwork. Offered an alibi, home alone that night, watching television. No one to confirm. No reason then to doubt him. Without forensic strength, suspicion dissipated. As the years passed, the file thickened but the trail thinned. Detectives retired. Evidence aged. The partial fingerprint on the window frame sat dormant, technologically mute. DNA beneath fingernails was preserved but untested beyond the era's limitations. Science was not ready. The city changed around the case. Crime rates dropped. Surveillance grew. Databases expanded. Yet Elena's disappearance remained frozen in analog time. A missing poster yellowed in sunlight. A mother aging beside an unanswered phone. When the cold case unit reopened the file decades later, they approached it differently. They treated every overlooked detail as potential ignition. They digitized crime scene photos, magnified pixels until patterns emerged. They enhanced the fingerprint, coaxing ridge detail from what once appeared smudged beyond use. And when the system returned the suspect's name, investigators felt both triumph and dread. Triumph because science had spoken. Dread because the man was gone. They revisited the diner co-worker's old statement about the city employee who lingered. They compared dates. Work logs confirmed he had serviced a broken freezer at the diner 1 month before Elena vanished. He had access to her workplace as well as her home building. 2 environments. 1 target. The more they mapped his assignments, the tighter the circle drew around her life. He repaired hallway lights in her building. Fixed plumbing 2 blocks away. Inspected fire escapes across the neighborhood. His job allowed him to observe without appearing to watch. Yet motive remained a shadow. No diary entries surfaced. No hidden trophies were discovered in his remaining belongings. His ex-wife described him as distant but not violent. Co-workers insisted he was quiet, maybe socially awkward, but harmless. The portrait of a predator did not match the public image. That contradiction unsettled detectives more than overt signs would have, because it meant invisibility had been his greatest weapon. As news of the DNA revelation spread, former residents of buildings he serviced began sharing stories. A woman recalled him insisting on entering her apartment alone to double-check a repair. Another remembered him commenting on her living schedule with unsettling accuracy. None had filed complaints at the time. Nothing overtly criminal had occurred. Patterns often reveal themselves only after damage is done. The cold case file now contained a suspect's name, a genetic link, a reconstructed timeline. But it also contained something else, the possibility that Elena was not chosen randomly, that she was studied, evaluated, selected. And that realization shifted the narrative from tragic accident to calculated act. Still, one element refused to align: the lack of physical evidence beyond DNA. No fibers from his clothing in her room. No footprints conclusively tied to him. No witnesses placing him at the building that night. The prosecution would have relied heavily on forensic certainty and circumstantial webbing. Would it have been enough? We will never know, because justice delayed became justice unreachable. The case file now bears a final notation: suspect identified through advanced DNA analysis, deceased prior to indictment. Officially closed. But closure feels clinical compared to the human echo left behind. In quiet moments, detectives revisit the 3:17 a.m. call. They imagine him standing in a phone booth, coins in hand, rehearsing silence, testing the line, listening to the tremor in a mother's voice. Did he smile? Did he breathe intentionally into the receiver to leave a trace of fear? Or was the breathing imagined, memory distorted by trauma? The line went dead. Minutes later, Elena stepped into darkness. And somewhere in the city, a man with master keys returned home, washed his hands, and blended into morning routine. That image lingers. Because while the database delivered a name decades later, it did not deliver the full story. It illuminated edges, but left the center obscured. It answered who, but left why, how, and where suspended in unresolved silence. And in that silence, the summer of 1992 continues to whisper. After the press conference, after the microphones were lowered and the word closed echoed through newsrooms, the detectives went back to work. Because closing a case on paper is one thing, understanding it is another. They reconstructed the final 48 hours of Elena Vargas's life with microscopic intensity. Receipts, phone logs, transit cards. A grainy ATM camera image from a bodega 2 blocks from the diner showed her withdrawing $20 at 10:52 p.m. the night she disappeared. She looked tired, normal, alive. Across town, the municipal maintenance technician, now identified as the DNA match, clocked out at 4:03 p.m. that same day. No overtime. No recorded assignments after hours. But detectives learned something subtle buried in archived union documents. Maintenance workers were occasionally called informally by tenants for minor fixes, cash jobs, unofficial, undocumented. That loophole lingered like an open door. Elena had mentioned the window latch issue to her coworker days before. "It feels loose," she'd said, "like it doesn't fully catch." The official work order was logged and completed. But what if there had been a follow-up? An excuse to return? A suggestion that it needed rechecking? Investigators combed through call sheets from the building's payphone in the lobby. Records incomplete, fragmented. One number appeared repeatedly in the weeks before the disappearance: the suspect's residence. The calls were short, under a minute. No record of who placed them. A tenant later remembered seeing him in the building late one evening, even though no maintenance was scheduled. He said he forgot a wrench, the tenant claimed decades later. Memory is slippery, but the details stuck. Detectives built a timeline of opportunity. Between midnight and 3 a.m., the building was quiet. Most residents asleep. The front entrance lock unreliable, often propped open during summer for airflow. The fire escape accessible from the alley, with minimal visibility. If someone knew the layout, entry could be achieved in under 60 seconds. The theory sharpened. He called at 3:17 a.m. to confirm activity. If Elena answered, he knew she was awake. If her mother answered, he knew which room she occupied. The breathing, intentional or imagined, bought him seconds to listen, to assess. Then the climb. Metal against metal. A soft shift of weight. A hand on the rail he had inspected weeks earlier. He would have known which step creaked, which didn't. The repaired latch, ironically stronger now, may have been loosened deliberately during the service visit, adjusted just enough to appear fixed while remaining vulnerable. Inside, there was no chaos. That detail haunts investigators. It suggests speed, control, perhaps even deception. A knock on the glass. A familiar face offering reassurance. It's maintenance. Just checking the latch. At 3 a.m, confusion blurs judgment. Or maybe he entered while she slept. The DNA under her fingernails indicates contact. Skin against skin. A defensive reaction, however brief. No blood found in the room suggests he subdued her quickly, possibly with a chokehold or chemical restraint. Toxicology was impossible without a body. The absence of evidence becomes its own void. Once outside, the route narrows. A vehicle would have been necessary. The alley allowed for temporary parking without drawing attention. In 1992, there were no license plate readers. No cameras capturing departure angles. The city was porous then, easier to slip through. The purse complicates everything. 3 miles away, placed with care behind the warehouse. Detectives now believe it was staged days later. The suspect likely retained it initially, perhaps to remove anything personally incriminating, then returned it to create distance. To suggest random crime. To keep police chasing geographic misdirection. Why not destroy it? Because destruction ends narrative. Placement extends it. Psychological profilers reviewing the case decades later suggested he may have wanted the investigation alive, but unfocused. A controlled burn rather than an extinguished flame. A predator who inserts himself into the story subtly, watching headlines, listening to radio updates, measuring police proximity. Did he attend the community vigil held 1 week after Elena vanished? Photos from that night show dozens of faces lit by candles. Grainy enlargements reveal a man in the background resembling him, head lowered, hands clasped. The image is inconclusive. But the possibility sends a chill through anyone who studies it. As cold case detectives pushed further, they uncovered a detail never fully explored in 1992, a complaint filed quietly by a tenant in another building he serviced. The tenant alleged the maintenance worker entered her apartment without proper notice, claiming an emergency leak that did not exist. The complaint was informal, resolved internally, never escalated. It painted a picture of boundary violation, subtle, deniable. Patterns emerge in hindsight. The suspect's personal life also revealed fractures. Divorce records indicated accusations of controlling behavior, though no physical violence was documented. An ex-neighbor recalled hearing him argue intensely on multiple occasions. Again, nothing criminal. Just hints. Hints are frustrating currency in investigations. Detectives tracked down a former coworker who had shared lunch breaks with him in 1992. The coworker described a conversation weeks after Elena's disappearance. He said it was crazy how girls just vanish, the coworker recalled. He said sometimes they want to disappear. Start over. At the time, it seemed philosophical. Now, it feels pointed. Investigators analyzed his time cards from the days following the disappearance. He reported to work as usual. No absences. No visible distress. Routine intact. If he committed the crime, he compartmentalized it with precision. Then came a discovery that unsettled even seasoned detectives. While cataloging items from a storage locker he had rented in the mid-90s, long since emptied but partially documented in auction records, they found an inventory list from the auctioneer. Among generic items, tools, old furniture, was a description. Box of women's clothing assorted. No specifics. No retained evidence. Sold to an unknown bidder decades ago. Could it have been unrelated? Possibly. But in the shadow of a DNA match, every detail sharpens. The cold case unit debated whether to pursue excavation of a construction site where he worked briefly in 1993, now covered by a parking structure. Ground-penetrating radar was inconclusive due to structural interference. Digging would be costly and unlikely to yield results after decades. Resources are finite. Decisions are brutal. Meanwhile, public reaction evolved. Some community members began questioning whether authorities were constructing a narrative around a dead man because it was convenient. Civil liberties advocates raised concerns about posthumous accusation without trial. The district attorney emphasized the strength of the DNA evidence, statistically overwhelming, scientifically sound. Still, doubt thrives where absence persists. Elena's mother met privately with investigators after the announcement. She asked questions they could not answer. Did she suffer? Was it quick? Did he say anything? Where did he take her? Each question hung in the room unanswered, heavy as stone. One detective later admitted that identifying the suspect felt like solving only half a puzzle. The edges aligned. The center remained hollow. The cold case designation is both promise and curse. It suggests time will eventually yield truth. But time also erodes memory, destroys landscapes, buries secrets under concrete and progress. The warehouse lot where the purse was found is now a condominium complex. The payphone used at 3:17 a.m. is scrap metal melted into something unrecognizable. Physical traces vanish. Only documentation endures. As part of the reopened investigation, detectives revisited the anonymous 1998 letter. Forensic linguists noted subtle phrasing patterns consistent with someone who worked within municipal systems, references to oversight and routine inspection embedded metaphorically. Could it have been him, reliving the crime through taunt? Or a colleague who suspected but feared speaking openly? No fingerprints. No saliva DNA on the stamp, degraded beyond recovery. The letter remains a ghost artifact, hovering between confession and coincidence. Cold case units often describe their work as archaeology. They dig through layers of time, brushing away assumptions, re-examining artifacts under new light. In Elena's case, the DNA was the buried shard that shifted the narrative. But archaeology rarely restores the whole structure. It reveals fragments. And fragments demand interpretation. As detectives compiled their final report for the district attorney, they included every uncertainty alongside every certainty. The DNA match, the access, the timeline alignment, the purse staging theory, the anonymous letter, the complaints, the map with red marks, the absence of a body. They did not claim omniscience. They claimed probability so strong it eclipsed reasonable doubt. But in the quiet after documentation, when the office emptied and fluorescent lights dimmed, one thought lingered among those who studied the file most closely. If he did this once, could he have done it before? And if so, how many other files labeled missing persons sit dormant, waiting for science to whisper another name from the past? The summer of 1992 may now carry a suspect's identity, but its shadows remain wide. The fire escape still clings to brick. The window latch still clicks shut. And somewhere between certainty and absence, Elena's story continues, not as a headline, not as a statistic, but as a question suspended in the dark. The deeper they dug, the less this felt like a single night. It felt like preparation. Cold case detectives began mapping the suspect's movements not just in the weeks before Elena vanished, but in the years leading up to 1992. Every building assignment, every maintenance log, every temporary transfer. They layered the information over a digital map of Queens, then expanded outward into Brooklyn and the Bronx. Reds bloomed across the screen. Addresses where he had keys, access, reason to enter, without suspicion. Access is power. And in the early 90s, power often went unquestioned. 2 other disappearances resurfaced under this new scrutiny. One in 1990. One in 1991. Both young women. Both vanished from apartment complexes serviced by municipal maintenance crews. Both cases eventually went cold. No bodies. No suspects. No forensic evidence preserved with the same rigor as Elena's. Detectives revisited those files with a mix of hope and dread. In the 1990 case, a 22-year-old art student disappeared after reporting a malfunctioning window lock. The repair ticket bore a signature, illegible at first glance. Forensic handwriting comparisons suggested it could belong to the same municipal technician, but records from that year were incomplete. Paper rosters had been archived poorly, some lost in a flood at a storage facility in the late 90s. Evidence lost to water. Time swallowing truth. In the 1991 case, a 25-year-old nurse vanished from a ground-floor apartment. Her purse was never recovered. No signs of forced entry. Detectives at the time speculated voluntary disappearance. A strained relationship. Financial stress. The case quietly faded. Now, under modern review, one chilling detail surfaced. Maintenance had been performed on her building's exterior lighting 3 days before she vanished. The assigned technician's name was missing from the scanned record, but payroll logs showed he was scheduled in that district. Coincidence? Or pattern? Without DNA from those scenes, there was no legal bridge. The physical evidence had either degraded or been discarded years earlier. In 1992, no one anticipated the forensic revolutions to come. Items considered insignificant were thrown away. Chain of custody standards were less stringent. Cold cases are often casualties of technological timing. Still, the parallels were impossible to ignore. Each woman lived alone. Each had recent maintenance activity in their building. Each vanished without a scream heard, without neighbors witnessing chaos. Quiet disappearances. Surgical. Detectives consulted behavioral analysts again. The profile evolved, an offender comfortable in structured environments, exploiting occupational authority. Someone who studied victims over time, choosing moments of vulnerability. Organized. Methodical. Capable of compartmentalizing violence behind routine. The suspect's life on paper supported that duality. He kept meticulous tool inventories, logged repair times precisely, rarely called in sick. Yet former coworkers now recalled subtle oddities. He volunteered for certain building assignments repeatedly, preferred evening shifts when possible. One coworker remembered him joking once, "Night repairs are easier, fewer eyes." At the time, it was just shop talk. Now it echoes. Investigators obtained archived vehicle registration records. In 1992, he owned a dark blue sedan, an older model Ford. A neighbor in Elena's building had described a dark-colored car, idling briefly the night she vanished. The description was vague, unreliable after decades. But the detail tightened the narrative thread. The vehicle itself no longer existed. Sold in 1996. Scrapped years later. No forensic recovery possible. Every path led to a door that time had locked. Still, the DNA remained immovable. Beneath Elena's fingernails, an intimate trace. Direct contact. Not environmental. Not casual. The statistical weight anchored the theory even as other elements floated in uncertainty. The cold case unit debated reopening the 2 earlier disappearances officially under his name. Legally, without physical linkage, it risked overreach. Ethically, families deserved transparency. Ultimately, investigators labeled them persons of interest correlation, a technical phrase that satisfied neither law nor emotion. Meanwhile, media coverage intensified. Talk shows framed the suspect as a hidden predator who slipped through the cracks of a city too overwhelmed in the early 90s to notice patterns. Editorials questioned systemic blind spots. How many municipal employees were vetted? How were complaints handled internally? Was the informal tenant complained about unauthorized entry truly investigated at the time, or quietly dismissed to avoid liability? The city released a statement defending past protocols while acknowledging that standards had evolved. It was a careful balance between accountability and institutional self-preservation. Elena's mother avoided interviews. Grief had shifted shape over decades, no longer explosive, but dense, settled. She visited the cold case unit privately, bringing a photograph of Elena taken 2 weeks before her disappearance. Sunlight on her face, wind in her hair. That's who she was, her mother said. Not a headline, not a case file. Detectives pinned the photo near their desks. As they continued reconstructing the suspect's psychology, another fragment surfaced. In 2003, years after Elena vanished, he had been reprimanded for improperly entering a vacant unit without authorization. The report described him as defensive, dismissive. He claimed he was just double-checking repairs. The reprimand was minor. No escalation followed. Minor infractions often precede major violations, but only in hindsight. Financial records offered no dramatic clues. No sudden withdrawals. No unexplained expenditures. He lived modestly. Paid bills on time. No gambling debts. No known addictions. If he harbored darkness, it left little financial footprint. Detectives also examined hospital records to determine whether he ever sought treatment for injuries consistent with a struggle in July 1992. No documented emergency visits during that period, but minor scratches would not require medical attention. And if Elena fought briefly before being subdued, marks may have been minimal. The absence of a body remained the case's most profound void. Without remains, investigators could not determine cause of death. Could not confirm whether she died that night or was held somewhere briefly. Could not rule out the possibility, however remote, that someone else became involved after initial contact. Yet nothing in the suspect's background suggested accomplices. He was solitary, self-contained. If he acted, he likely acted alone. One theory emerged reluctantly. He may have used his municipal access to dispose of evidence in ways nearly impossible to trace. Construction sites, waste management routes, infrastructure zones off-limits to civilians. In the early 90s, oversight in certain sectors was less rigorous than today. But theory without proof remains speculation. As weeks turned into months after the case announcement, public attention began to drift. Another tragedy commanded headlines. Another crisis filled airtime. The phrase 1992 cold case closed faded from trending topics. Inside the cold case unit, though, momentum did not slow. They requested excavation of a small wooded parcel upstate once owned by a distant relative of the suspect. Permission was granted after negotiation. Ground crews worked for days under gray skies. Soil was sifted. Tree roots examined. Nothing human emerged. The pattern repeated. Hope, labor, silence. A detective reviewing archived interview tapes from 1992 noticed something previously overlooked. During his brief questioning, the suspect had corrected an officer about the exact model of window latch used in Elena's building. The correction was precise, almost technical pride. At the time, It demonstrated expertise. Now, it suggests familiarity bordering on fixation. Language reveals more than intent sometimes. The anonymous 1998 letter resurfaced in discussion again. Look closer to home. She trusted him. The phrase trusted him gnawed at investigators. Trust implies familiarity, repeated interaction, a face not immediately alarming. Did he cultivate that trust? Small talk during repairs, casual remarks in hallways, a nod of recognition when passing her on the street. Enough to lower guard, not enough to trigger alarm. Predators often rely on normalcy, and that normalcy is what makes retrospective horror so sharp. Neighbors who once described him as polite now revisit those memories with suspicion. Did he watch from behind neutral expressions? Did he memorize routines while appearing to fix pipes and tighten bolts? The city hums forward, but the past pulses beneath it. The cold case may bear a suspect's name, but its edges keep expanding. Each new layer of scrutiny uncovers more questions than answers. Patterns without proof. Correlations without conviction. Yet one fact anchors everything. Elena fought. However briefly. However desperately. Her DNA evidence captured that moment. A biological record of resistance preserved through decades of technological evolution. In that microscopic trace lies both justice and torment. Justice because it named a man long invisible. Torment because it could not tell the full story. And so the investigation continues, not officially reopened, not legally active, but alive in the minds of those who refuse to let it fade into archival silence. Because somewhere between access and opportunity, between maintenance logs and midnight calls, a line was crossed. And once crossed, it changed everything. By the time winter settled over New York in early 2020, the word closed had already begun to feel misleading. Inside the cold case unit, Elena Vargas's file was no longer stacked in storage. It was spread across desks, pinned to boards, cross-referenced with maps and timelines that stretched across 3 boroughs. Detectives no longer saw a single night in July 1992. They saw a corridor of opportunity that may have existed for years. They turned their focus to geography. Every confirmed work assignment the suspect had between 1989 and 1993 was plotted digitally. The pattern was unsettling. Clusters formed around older apartment complexes with exterior fire escapes and outdated security systems. Buildings housing students, nurses, service workers, people with irregular hours, often living alone. Opportunity nested inside anonymity. Investigators examined old municipal vehicle logs. In 1992, maintenance employees signed out fleet vehicles when assigned to larger repair jobs. But for smaller district routes, they often used personal cars and were reimbursed later. The suspect's reimbursement record showed frequent mileage claims in the weeks before Elena vanished, more than other employees in the same district. Nothing criminal about that. But on the night of July 14th into July 15th, 1992, there was no official assignment logged. No mileage claimed. If he drove that night, it would not appear in records. Detectives sought out an elderly mechanic who once serviced his blue sedan in the early 90s. The mechanic remembered him faintly. Quiet guy. Always paid cash. The service history records were long gone. Paper ledgers discarded years earlier. Cash leaves no trail. Meanwhile, forensic specialists re-examined the nail scrapings with even newer technology, touched DNA amplification techniques that did not exist even 5 years earlier. The original match was reconfirmed. Strong. Clear. But additional minor DNA contributors were detected, too degraded to identify conclusively. Likely incidental transfer from shared environments. Yet it raised a haunting question. Was anyone else in that room before or after the struggle? The lab could not answer definitively. Attention shifted again to the 3:17 a.m. call. Telecommunications experts were consulted to reconstruct how routing worked in 1992. The call likely originated within a 2-mile radius, possibly from a payphone cluster near an elevated train station. Detectives located an archived city planning map showing payphone placements from that year. 3 units fell within plausible distance from the suspect's residence and Elena's building. One of those payphones had been removed in 1995 after repeated vandalism complaints. A retired transit worker recalled that the booth's interior light was often broken, leaving callers in near darkness. A shadowed box of glass and metal, coins dropping, breathing into a receiver. Investigators tried to determine whether the suspect had any history of making anonymous calls. There were no documented complaints. But in the pre-digital era, nuisance calls were rarely traced unless repeated or explicitly threatening. Elena's mother had always insisted the breathing was deliberate. Skeptics once suggested trauma had distorted memory. Now, detectives reconsidered her account with renewed gravity. They revisited witness statements from that summer. A teenage boy living across the alley in 1992 had told police he saw a man on the fire escape earlier that week, not the night of the disappearance, but 2 nights prior. He described the man as wearing a dark jacket and cap, crouched low. The sighting was dismissed at the time as misinterpretation. Residents sometimes used fire escapes to smoke. But the timing aligns uncomfortably with the window latch repair. Preparation. Investigators theorized that he may have rehearsed the climb. Tested noise levels. Measured distance from window to railing. Familiarity breeds confidence. Psychologists reviewing the case suggested escalation behavior. Surveillance, minor boundary testing, controlled intrusion, then abduction. Each step increasing risk tolerance. The phone call as psychological rehearsal. The purse placement as narrative manipulation. If true, this was not impulsive. It was methodical. The question that now consumed the unit was disposal. Without a body, motive and method remain partially speculative. Detectives examined landfill records from 1992. Thousands of tons of waste moved daily through municipal systems. If he utilized city access to discard remains within that stream, recovery would be virtually impossible decades later. Another theory suggested water. The East River, the Hudson, industrial canals, currents that carry secrets silently. But again, no evidence tied him to those locations at relevant times. They searched for personal connections outside work, cabins, hunting leases, rural properties. Nothing direct. Only the small wooded parcel previously excavated without result. One detective proposed a chilling possibility. What if he did not travel far at all? What if concealment occurred within a structure he once serviced? Inside walls, beneath floorboards, in crawl spaces later renovated or demolished. Over 3 decades, entire buildings had been gutted and rebuilt. If evidence was hidden within them, it may have been destroyed unknowingly. The city rebuilds itself constantly. In doing so, it buries history. As investigative energy intensified, so did emotional strain. A younger detective assigned to the case admitted to senior staff that the absence of remains felt like a personal failure. "We know who," she said, "but we can't bring her home." The phrase lingered. Bring her home. That became the unofficial second objective. Public tips resumed briefly after the case announcement. A woman claimed she once dated the suspect in 1994 and noticed he kept a locked toolbox he refused to open. Another neighbor alleged he dug in his backyard late at night in 1993. Detectives followed each lead. The backyard had been landscaped twice since then. Soil testing revealed nothing conclusive. Each tip flickered, then dimmed. Meanwhile, the 2 earlier disappearances, 1990 and 1991, pressed against the investigation's edges. Families of those women demanded updates. Detectives met with them, careful not to overpromise. Without forensic linkage, the law draws hard lines. Still, patterns whisper even when courts cannot hear them. In reviewing archived internal memos from the Housing Department, investigators found documentation of budget cuts in 1991 that reduced oversight on maintenance scheduling. Employees had more autonomy in selecting routes, more freedom to adjust timetables, less supervision. Autonomy is fertile ground for misconduct. The suspect's personnel file contained annual evaluations describing him as independent and self-directed. Praise in bureaucratic language. Ominous in retrospect. One detail emerged that unsettled even the most seasoned detective. During his divorce proceedings in 1988, his ex-wife had alleged that he once entered their bedroom at night and stood watching her sleep. The statement was buried in court transcripts, never explored beyond marital dispute context. A pattern of watching. Surveillance without confrontation. The profile sharpened further. If Elena was targeted, she was likely observed repeatedly. Her class schedule noted mentally. Her work shifts memorized. Her mother's bedtime routine understood. The phone call at 3:17 a.m. was not random. It was calibrated to the quietest hour. Yet even as theory solidified, proof remained finite. The cold case designation stayed intact. Officially closed. Practically unresolved. The phrase "forgotten evidence reveals unexpected suspect" echoed in headlines, but detectives knew the evidence was not forgotten. It had been waiting. Waiting for technology to catch up. Waiting for someone to look again. What else was waiting? They ordered a comprehensive audit of other cold cases from the early 90s involving apartment entry without forced damage. It would take months to complete. Patterns might emerge. Or they might dissolve into coincidence. The city outside moved on. Snow fell. Sirens wailed. Construction cranes carved new skylines where old warehouses once stood, including the lot where Elena's purse had been placed so carefully. That warehouse had been demolished in 2001. Its foundation poured over. If any trace lingered beneath that gravel in 1992, it was gone now. But one thing remained stubbornly present: the 3:17 a.m. call. Detectives reconstructed the sequence repeatedly. Call. Pause. Breath. Click. Entry. Disappearance. Purse placement. Silence. It plays like a script written in darkness. And though science has named the man who likely stepped through that window, the script still lacks its final act. Somewhere between preparation and execution, between invisibility and exposure, lies the missing chapter. Until that chapter is found, if it ever is, the case may be stamped closed. But it will never truly rest. The longer they studied him, the more ordinary he appeared. That was the most disturbing part. Photographs from the early 90s show a man with thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a neutral expression that barely registered on film. He blended into group shots of maintenance crews, standing slightly apart but not isolated. The kind of face you would not remember 5 minutes after seeing it. The kind of face that could stand beneath a candlelight vigil and never be questioned. Detectives enlarged one particular image from the 1992 community vigil for Elena. The photo was grainy, colors washed by age. In the back row, partially obscured by shadow, stood a man resembling him. Head bowed, hands folded, watching. The image could not prove identity, but it planted a seed. If he attended, he would have witnessed grief firsthand. Heard Elena's mother speak through tears. Seen classmates clutch photographs. That proximity to mourning suggested something deeper than impulse. It suggested immersion. Control extended beyond the act itself. Psychological analysts described it as post-offense engagement, a need to remain connected to the narrative, to measure the damage inflicted, to feel power in proximity to sorrow. It aligned with the purse placement, with the anonymous letter years later, with subtle comments to coworkers about girls who just vanish. The more investigators reconstructed his behavior, the clearer the duality became. By day, municipal employee, tightening bolts, replacing fuses, restoring order. By night, at least once, an intruder exploiting that trust. They re-examined his schedule the week after Elena disappeared. On July 16th, 2 days later, he was assigned to repair a broken stairwell light in a building less than a mile from where the purse was found. The proximity was striking. No proof tied him to the warehouse lot, but the overlap tightened the geographic loop. He moved within that radius comfortably. Detectives also reviewed his purchasing history through archived credit bureau snapshots. In August 1992, he bought a new set of work gloves from a hardware supplier. The timing was suggestive. Gloves wear out, yes, but investigators wondered whether a prior pair had been discarded. Speculation again. but patterns accumulate weight. One retired officer from the original task force confessed something quietly when interviewed decades later. "We were overwhelmed back then," he said. "The city was drowning in cases. You triage what bleeds the most." Elena's disappearance had bled quietly. No body, no blood, no screaming headlines beyond the first week. Other crimes with visible brutality consumed manpower. In that environment, a predator relying on subtlety could thrive. Cold case detectives found a faded notebook among archived evidence, a small spiral pad recovered from Elena's desk. Most entries were mundane, class notes, grocery reminders. But on one page, scribbled faintly near the margin, was a line. "Maintenance guy weird?" The handwriting trailed off, as if she'd started to elaborate but stopped. The note had been logged but never emphasized in 1992. Now it felt like a whisper from the past. Investigators could not determine when she wrote it. Days before? Weeks? The ink analysis was inconclusive. But the presence of doubt in her own words shifted perception. Perhaps she sensed something off. Perhaps she dismissed it, unwilling to seem paranoid. Predators often depend on that social hesitation. The cold case unit brought in a forensic linguist to examine the 1998 anonymous letter once more. The phrase "she trusted him" stood out again. Analysts compared it against writing samples from the suspect's employment forms and divorce transcripts. Sentence structure showed similarities: short, declarative statements, minimal emotional language. But without definitive markers, it remained suggestive rather than conclusive. Still, the possibility that he mailed that letter 6 years after the crime was chilling. A delayed echo. Investigators turned their attention to 2008, the year he died. He suffered a heart attack in his small apartment. Paramedics found him alone. No suicide note. No confession. Nothing overtly suspicious among his belongings. But when inventorying his residence posthumously, relatives discarded several boxes of old documents and clothing before anyone considered future forensic relevance. Time erases potential evidence long before questions are asked. One neighbor from that building remembered something odd. "He used to wake up screaming sometimes," she said. "Not every night, but once in a while." Nightmares? Or guilt surfacing after years of suppression? It is impossible to know. The human mind fractures under secrets differently in each individual. Detectives examined his medical history for signs of stress-related conditions in later years. Hypertension, elevated cortisol markers. None documented. If guilt existed, it left no clinical trail. As investigators probed deeper, a more uncomfortable question emerged within the department. Had there been institutional blind spots? The informal complaint from another tenant about unauthorized entry, was it minimized to protect departmental reputation? Did supervisors fail to escalate subtle red flags because no overt crime occurred? The Housing Authority launched an internal historical review, though its conclusions remained guarded. Policy changes since the 90s had tightened oversight: two-person teams for certain after-hours repairs, mandatory logging of entry times. Reforms born of hindsight. But reforms do not rewrite history. The two earlier disappearances remained in limbo. Detectives traveled to meet one of those families in person. They presented what they could without promising linkage. The family clung to the possibility, however fragile, that a name might eventually attach to their loss as well. Hope is painful when it rests on inference. Back in Queens, Elena's apartment building hosted a small memorial gathering marking the anniversary of her disappearance. Fewer people attended than in 1992. Time thins crowds. But candles still flickered along the sidewalk. A new generation of residents listened as older neighbors recounted that summer night. One detective stood at the edge of the gathering, observing. He imagined the suspect standing there decades earlier, absorbing grief like background noise. The thought tightened his chest. The fire escape creaked softly in the evening breeze. Investigators also explored digital genealogy databases, hoping distant relatives of the suspect might inadvertently hold information: letters, journals, anecdotal confessions shared privately. Outreach was delicate. Most relatives were shocked by the revelation of his DNA connection. None reported prior admissions of violence. If he carried secrets, he buried them alone. The question of motive persisted like a low hum. Was it obsession? Power? Resentment toward young women living independent lives? Or something less definable, a compulsion triggered by opportunity? Without confession, motive is constructed from fragments. In reviewing cold cases nationwide with similar occupational access patterns, detectives noted parallels: electricians, security guards, maintenance workers exploiting routine trust. Authority without scrutiny becomes camouflage. The Elena Vargas case now served as a training reference within the department, a reminder that invisibility can be engineered through normalcy. Yet despite institutional learning, personal anguish remained unresolved. Elena's mother once asked a detective, if he did this, did he ever think about her after? The detective could not answer, but privately many believed he did. The anonymous letter, the possible vigil attendance, the subtle remarks, they suggested memory lingered. Predators sometimes revisit scenes internally long after the act. As the years after the announcement drifted forward, the case settled into a strange dual state: legally concluded, emotionally active. Detectives kept a digital alert set on any new forensic match connected to his DNA profile in national databases. If another crime scene sample aligned, they would know. So far, silence. Which could mean Elena was the only one. Or that evidence in other cases was never preserved. The distinction is razor-thin. In quiet hours at the precinct, the 3:17 a.m. timestamp glows on archived printouts. A moment frozen. A pivot point between ordinary and irreversible. Everything before it was routine. Everything after it was absence. And even now, decades later, that absence reverberates through hallways, through files, through a city that has rebuilt itself over the space where secrets were once carried in darkness. The pressure inside the interrogation room feels different now, heavier, charged, as if the air itself knows something the city does not. The fluorescent lights hum above a metal table scarred with decades of confessions and denials, and across from Detective Ruiz sits a man who once blended into the background of 1992 like wallpaper, quiet, polite, forgettable. Thomas Alder, a name buried in old payroll sheets and faded tenant lists. A man who lived 3 blocks from the crime scene, who told officers he heard nothing, saw nothing, knew nothing. For 30 years, he was nothing, until the forgotten evidence said otherwise. He doesn't look like a monster. He looks tired. 58 years old. Thin gray hair combed carefully to one side. Hands folded as if in prayer. But there is something in his eyes, something that flickers when Ruiz slides the clear evidence bag onto the table. Inside it, a tarnished brass keychain shaped like a subway token, recovered from the victim's apartment in 1992, misfiled, mislabeled, forgotten in a storage box that gathered dust through 3 police commissioners and 2 mayors. A keychain with microscopic skin cells trapped beneath the loop, invisible in a world before advanced DNA analysis. Invisible until now. Ruiz doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He simply says the words, "We matched the DNA." And the hum of the lights grows louder in the silence that follows. Back in 1992, the victim had been found sprawled across her living room floor, the window cracked open to a humid June night, curtains drifting like ghosts in the breeze. No forced entry. No robbery. Just a brutal, deliberate act that shocked the neighborhood into locking doors and watching shadows. She had been 26, a graduate student with plans that stretched far beyond the city skyline. The tabloids screamed cold case before the body was even buried. The police canvassed every apartment in the building, including Alder's. He had opened the door in a wrinkled t-shirt, sleepy-eyed, offering condolences and nothing more. He signed the statement. He closed the door. And he disappeared into the city's blur. But the keychain never disappeared. It lay in a plastic bin marked miscellaneous, its significance buried beneath paperwork errors and human fatigue. When the cold case unit reopened the file decades later, digitizing evidence, cross-checking everything against modern databases, The brass token caught the eye of a young forensic analyst who questioned why an unidentified item had never been tested. A swab, a sequence, a profile. And suddenly the past surged forward with teeth. Alder shifts in his chair now, jaw tightening, as Ruiz describes the statistical probability. 1 in several trillion. Not a coincidence. Not contamination. The same DNA found beneath the victim's fingernails, preserved in slides that had sat in refrigerated storage like a time capsule waiting for justice. The same DNA that once meant nothing because technology hadn't caught up. Now it means everything. He says he can explain. They always say that. He claims he knew her casually, that they spoke in the hallway, that perhaps he visited her apartment once, briefly, harmlessly. He says maybe he dropped the keychain then. Maybe she scratched him playfully. Maybe the world is misremembering him. His voice trembles, but not with sorrow, with calculation. Each sentence feels assembled, tested for weakness before release. Ruiz leans forward. There were defensive wounds. There were neighbors who heard a muffled argument that night, a man's voice sharp and low. There is a witness who reported seeing someone leaving the building around midnight, cap pulled down, shoulders hunched. The description was vague. Too vague in 1992. But when placed beside an old driver's license photo of Alder from that year, the resemblance prickles. Outside the precinct, word spreads quickly. Reporters gather, cameras pointed toward a building that has seen too many secrets. 1992 cold case reopened. Forgotten evidence reveals unexpected suspect. The headlines write themselves. For the victim's family, who have carried grief like a second spine for 3 decades, the news hits like an earthquake. Hope and dread in equal measure. They have learned not to trust hope. Inside the interrogation room, the clock ticks with surgical precision. Alder wipes his palms on his slacks. He asks for a lawyer. The request lands like a stone in water, rippling outward. Procedure resumes. Formalities. But something has shifted. The forgotten neighbor is no longer background noise. He is the center of a storm. Investigators dig deeper into his past, unearthing patterns that once seemed ordinary. A restraining order filed by a former girlfriend in 1995, alleging violent outbursts. A job termination for inappropriate conduct. Police calls for disturbances that never led to charges. Individually, they are footnotes. Together, they form a silhouette that looks disturbingly familiar. They search his current residence, a modest house in Queens filled with meticulous order. Books aligned perfectly. Tools arranged by size. In a locked drawer in his bedroom, they find old photographs of the neighborhood from the early 90s. One image stops them cold. It shows the victim's building, taken from across the street, zoomed in slightly, as if studying a specific window. The date stamp reads May 1992, 1 month before the murder. When confronted with the photograph, Alder's composure fractures for a split second. A blink too long, a swallow too hard. He insists he was interested in architecture, in urban decay, in documenting city life. But why keep that photo for 30 years? Why keep it hidden? The forensic team revisits every scrap of physical evidence. Fibers from the victim's couch. A partial shoe print near the window. Modern enhancement techniques pull detail from what once looked like smudges. The pattern aligns with a brand of sneaker popular in the early 90s, a brand Alder wore, confirmed by an old high school friend who remembers because Alder was oddly loyal to that specific design. It's circumstantial, yes, but the net tightens thread by thread. The prosecutor reviews the file with measured caution. Cold cases are delicate. Memories fade. Witnesses die. Defense attorneys thrive on reasonable doubt woven from time's erosion. Yet the DNA is a pillar. Solid. Unforgiving. Science does not forget. As days pass, the city's interest intensifies. Talk radio, debates rage. How many other forgotten evidence boxes sit in basements? How many other names sleep peacefully, unaware that a swab could wake them? The victim's face returns to television screens, youthful and smiling, frozen in the year she died. Her story is no longer a faded clipping, it is a live wire. Alder is released pending further proceedings, but under strict monitoring. The legal machine grinds slowly, methodically. He walks out of the precinct into a forest of microphones. He shields his face, says nothing, disappears into a waiting car. Neighbors in Queens stare from behind curtains, whispering. The unexpected suspect is no longer invisible. Detectives revisit the building where it all began. The hallway smells different now, fresh paint, new carpet, but the layout is unchanged. They stand outside the apartment that once held violence and silence. The current tenant watches nervously as officers measure distances, reconstruct angles, map movements. They imagine the struggle, the panic, the final moments. They imagine Alder standing in that doorway, deciding something irreversible. One retired officer from the original 1992 investigation watches the news from his living room, shaking his head. He remembers canvassing that very floor, remembers thinking the killer had to be close. He remembers the exhaustion, the pressure from superiors, the sinking realization when leads dried up. He calls Ruiz and says only, "Don't let him slip." The grand jury convenes. Evidence is presented with clinical precision. The keychain, the DNA profile, the fingernail scrapings, the photograph, the enhanced shoe print analysis. The defense counters with alternative explanations, with questions about contamination, about the chain of custody across decades. They suggest obsession from investigators eager to close a high-profile cold case. They paint Alder as a convenient villain in a story hungry for an ending. But the narrative of science is difficult to dismantle. The probability numbers echo in the chamber like a drumbeat. Outside, the victim's family gathers on the courthouse steps, holding a framed photo that has faded at the edges. They speak softly about waiting, about birthdays marked in absence, about a mother who died never knowing who took her daughter. They say justice delayed is still justice, if it comes. And in the quiet spaces between legal arguments and news cycles, the city feels the weight of years collapsing into the present. A crime that once felt untouchable now has a face. An apartment building that once whispered now roars with memory. The forgotten evidence has done what time could not. It has dragged a shadow into the light. Yet certainty is a fragile thing until a verdict is spoken. Alder sits at home under the watchful eye of surveillance, staring at walls that seem to inch closer each night. Detectives review transcripts again and again, searching for inconsistencies, for cracks. The case that was once a cold file is now a living, breathing force pressing toward resolution. Somewhere in a storage room, the empty evidence box that once held the keychain remains on a shelf, its label curling at the edges. It is a reminder that justice can be delayed by a single oversight, a single misfiled item, a single moment of human error. And it is a reminder that even in a city as vast and unforgiving as this one, the past never truly disappears. It waits. It gathers dust. And when the time is right, it speaks. The courtroom doors swing open before dawn, and the line is already wrapped around the block, a silent testament to how a 1992 cold case has clawed its way back into the city's bloodstream. Inside, the air is brittle with expectation. Wooden benches creak under the weight of reporters, law students, retired detectives who once walked the same corridors with thicker hair and thinner case files. At the defense table sits Thomas Alder, shoulders squared, suit pressed, expression carefully neutral. Across the aisle, the victim's family holds hands as if bracing for impact. The prosecution begins not with emotion, but with time. They project a photograph of New York in 1992, grainy skyline, analog clocks, a world before smartphones and surveillance on every corner. They speak of a humid June night, of a 26-year-old graduate student found lifeless on her living room floor, of a window cracked open to a city that kept moving while one life stopped. They say the word cold case and let it hang, heavy and unresolved. Then they say, forgotten evidence. And the room shifts. The keychain is introduced first. The brass subway token charm, tarnished but intact, displayed in a sealed bag beneath the courtroom lights. Jurors lean forward. It looks insignificant, cheap, ordinary. The The prosecutor explains how it was recovered from the apartment in 1992, logged incorrectly, misfiled, buried in a box labeled miscellaneous. A mistake so small it felt harmless. A mistake that cost decades. Then the science takes the stand. The forensic analyst speaks in precise, measured tones, describing how advanced DNA sequencing extracted a profile from microscopic skin cells trapped beneath the keychain loop. She explains the statistical probability, 1 in several trillion, that the DNA belongs to anyone other than the defendant. She describes how that same profile matches biological material preserved beneath the victim's fingernails, collected during autopsy and frozen in time. She does not dramatize. She does not speculate. She states facts. The numbers land like hammer blows. The defense rises calmly. They question chain of custody. They question storage conditions across 30 years. They raise the specter of contamination: who handled the keychain, who opened the box, who breathed near the evidence. They ask the analyst whether she can guarantee absolute certainty. She answers with the language of science. No system is infallible, but the protocols were followed, the controls were clean, the match is overwhelming. The jury watches her closely. They are not scientists, but they understand odds. Next comes the photograph found in Alder's locked drawer. The victim's building, zoomed slightly toward her window, dated May 1992. The prosecutor asks why a man would keep such an image hidden for 3 decades. The defense counters that photography was a hobby, that urban architecture fascinated him. That coincidence is not guilt. The jurors study the image projected on the screen. It feels invasive, almost voyeuristic. A building turned into a target. A retired detective from the original investigation takes the stand, voice rough with age. He recalls knocking on doors that night, speaking to residents, including Alder. He remembers thinking the killer had to be close, that violence without forced entry suggested familiarity or proximity. He admits the case stalled. He admits leads dried up. He admits the keychain was never tested. The defense seizes on that admission: human error, flawed process, tunnel vision then and now. The prosecution reframes it as the reality of 1992 technology, not malice, not conspiracy. The tension coils tighter. Witnesses from Alder's past appear one by one. A former girlfriend describes his temper, sudden and explosive, though she never imagined murder. A former coworker recounts inappropriate comments, a fixation on a female colleague who felt uncomfortable but never filed a report. Each testimony alone is a shadow. Together they form a darker outline. The defense objects repeatedly, arguing character assassination. The judge allows limited portions. The jury listens, faces unreadable. Then comes the timeline. Phone records from 1992 are sparse, but building entry logs and neighbor statements are reconstructed with painstaking care. A neighbor who once reported hearing a muffled argument that night takes the stand, older now, voice uncertain but steady enough. She recalls a man's voice, low and sharp, around midnight. She cannot identify it. She never saw his face. The defense emphasizes the uncertainty. 30 years erodes memory like water on stone. But the prosecution reminds the jury that uncertainty does not erase presence. The enhanced shoe print analysis is presented next. A forensic footwear expert explains how modern imaging revealed a partial tread pattern near the apartment window. He compares it to a sneaker brand popular in the early 90s, one Alder was known to wear obsessively, according to a high school friend who testifies about his loyalty to that specific design. The defense calls it circumstantial, common footwear, millions sold. The expert concedes the point, but maintains the pattern is consistent. Not definitive. Consistent. The case builds not on one pillar but many. Throughout it all, Alder remains composed. He takes notes. He whispers to his attorney. He occasionally glances toward the jury, as if searching for a sympathetic face. When he finally chooses to testify, the courtroom tightens. He speaks softly, almost gently. He says he did know the victim, casually, as neighbors. He says he may have visited her apartment once to help with a minor repair, that perhaps he dropped the keychain then. He suggests that the DNA under her fingernails could have come from an innocent interaction, passing an object, brushing hands. He denies violence. He denies anger. He denies everything. The prosecutor approaches slowly during cross-examination. She asks why, if he visited only once innocently, he never mentioned it in 1992. He says he forgot. She asks why he kept a photograph of her building hidden in a locked drawer. He says it meant nothing. She asks why the DNA under her fingernails, collected from defensive wounds, matches him so precisely. He pauses. For a fraction of a second, the room holds its breath. He says he cannot explain it. Cannot explain it. The words echo louder than any accusation. Closing arguments arrive like an approaching storm. The prosecution stands before the jury and weaves the threads together. The keychain, the DNA, the photograph, the proximity, the behavioral history. They argue that time concealed the truth, but did not change it. They say forgotten evidence does not equal forgotten guilt. They ask the jury to see the pattern, to trust science, to deliver justice long delayed. The defense counters with doubt. They speak of reasonable doubt as the cornerstone of the system. They warn against the seductive power of a reopened cold case, the pressure to close a chapter for emotional relief. They suggest investigators built a narrative around Alder once the DNA match appeared, fitting every ambiguous detail into a predetermined frame. They remind jurors that coincidence, though uncomfortable, exists. The jury retires. Hours stretch into a day. The city waits. News vans idle outside the courthouse. Commentators dissect every argument, every facial expression, every pause. The victim's family sits in a small room, hands clasped, eyes fixed on nothing. Alder waits in a holding cell, the hum of fluorescent lights replacing the courtroom's charged silence. When the jury finally returns, the courtroom fills again, breath suspended collectively. The foreperson stands, voice steady but quiet. The word guilty lands with seismic force. Not shouted, not dramatic, just spoken. Count after count, the same word. Guilty. Alder's composure fractures at last. His jaw tightens, eyes flickering with something unreadable. Anger, disbelief, fear. The victim's family collapses into tears, not of joy but of release, of exhaustion finally acknowledged. Reporters rush to transmit the verdict. 1992 cold case closed. Forgotten evidence reveals unexpected suspect. The headlines flash across screens in real time. Yet even as the gavel falls, the story does not feel simple. 30 years of silence cannot be erased in a single afternoon. The neighborhood where it began feels different tonight. Lighter, perhaps, but also haunted by what hid in plain sight. A neighbor who once nodded politely in the hallway is now a convicted killer. The ordinary has been redefined. As Alder is led away in handcuffs, the brass keychain remains in evidence, no longer miscellaneous, no longer forgotten. It is small enough to fit in a palm, light enough to overlook, powerful enough to shatter decades of denial. The courtroom empties slowly, but the echo of the verdict lingers, vibrating through a city that has learned a hard truth. The past does not sleep forever. Outside, dusk settles over New York, the skyline glowing against a darkening sky. Life continues. Traffic surges, subway trains roar beneath the streets, but somewhere in the rhythm of the city there is a subtle shift, a reminder that even the coldest case can burn again when a single overlooked detail finds its voice. And in that realization lies both comfort and unease, because for every box reopened, for every forgotten piece of evidence rediscovered, there may be others still waiting in the dark, silent for now, but never truly gone. Sentencing day arrives under a gray, low ceiling of clouds that seem to press down on the courthouse steps, as if even the sky understands the weight of what is about to be finalized. The cameras are back. The microphones. The murmured repetition of a phrase that has now become part of the city's vocabulary. 1992 cold case. Closed. Forgotten evidence. Unexpected suspect. The story that refused to die is about to receive its final punctuation. Inside, Thomas Alder stands thinner than he did at trial, the sharp lines of his face more pronounced, the careful composure worn down by weeks of headlines and isolation. The guilty verdict still hangs over him like a permanent shadow. He does not look at the gallery. He does not look at the victim's family. He stares straight ahead, jaw locked, hands clasped behind his back. The judge speaks first, voice steady, deliberate. She recounts the brutality of the crime, the vulnerability of the victim, the decades of unanswered questions that followed. She acknowledges the technological advances that made the conviction possible, noting that justice delayed does not mean justice denied. The courtroom is silent except for the soft scratch of a reporter's pen and the distant hum of ventilation. When the victim's sister steps forward to deliver her impact statement, the air shifts. Her voice trembles at first, then strengthens. She speaks of birthdays celebrated with an empty chair, of parents who went to their graves never knowing who took their daughter, of walking past the building on summer nights and feeling her chest tighten. She says the word neighbor with a bitterness that slices through the room. She says trust was murdered too. Alder is given the opportunity to speak. For a long moment, it seems he will decline. Then, he clears his throat. His voice is softer than anyone expects. He maintains his innocence. He says he is a victim of flawed memory and overconfident science. He offers no apology. No sorrow directed at the family. Only a vague lament about a system that, in his words, needed someone to blame. The absence of remorse lands heavier than any confession. The sentence is severe. Decades in prison, effectively the remainder of his life. The gavel falls once more, final and absolute. Court officers move toward him. The handcuffs click shut with a metallic snap that echoes through the wooden chamber. This time, there is no pending hearing, no waiting on deliberation. The chapter is sealed. Outside, the news spreads in waves. Life sentence in New York 1992 cold case. Forgotten keychain leads to prison term. Commentators speak of forensic breakthroughs, of cold case units combing through aging evidence rooms across the country. The case becomes a symbol of persistence, of technology, of the long memory of justice. But beyond the headlines, there is something quieter unfolding. In Queens, neighbors who once exchanged polite greetings with Alder now replay every interaction in their minds. The borrowed lawn tool, the nod across the driveway, the ordinary conversations about weather and traffic. Each memory is re-examined under a harsher light. The idea that someone capable of such violence could blend so seamlessly into daily life unsettles them more than the crime itself. At the precinct, the cold case unit feels a complicated pride. They reopened a file that had gathered dust for 30 years.